My name is Rena Paul. I'm going to briefly introduce myself and my background. I was a prosecutor for 13 years. I started my career in the same place that Susan did at the Manhattan DA's office. And then I left to be a federal prosecutor in the Eastern District of New York in Brooklyn. And I have left there and I have been working in the private sector since. I co-founded a law firm that is called Alcalaw, which takes a humanistic and holistic approach to law and helps corporations, organizations, and individuals who are in crisis. We are also offering lawyer well-being training to legal employers, including prosecutors' offices. So I teach yoga and meditation and mindfulness at the city bar, also, among other things, at Brooklyn Law School, where I teach as an adjunct. I'm going to turn it over to Alison to introduce herself.
Thank you. So my name is Alison Trenk. I am a practicing licensed clinical social worker and mental health therapist for the past 10 years. When I was in social work school, I specialized in evidence-based trauma-informed practices, which led me to do work with trauma survivors, which then subsequently led me to work in two different prosecutor offices, one in the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office, where I worked with the Victim Services Unit. So I was working alongside prosecutors, special victims, human trafficking, gangs, all the above. And then later on in my career, I worked at the Manhattan DA's office as well. Third one right here. And I was used for my clinical skills in their newly formed Alternatives to Incarceration unit for people accused of crimes who were also experiencing trauma and needed sort of a clinical lens when informing kind of an alternate consequence to their behaviors. Right now, I am presently in practice doing dialectical behavior therapy, which is also known as DBT. And DBT was originally designed as an intervention for people who were having suicidal ideation and severe emotional dysregulation. But it has been found to be useful for many other mental illness challenges because it teaches people skills. And it also teaches people skills where they can be used as like accessible tools when they're having feelings of emotional dysregulation or overwhelm, stress, sadness, etc. So DBT has a foundation in mindfulness and requires that one learn skills in order to slow down to be mindful. So kind of on the heels of what other people have spoken about earlier, when we're mindful, we're able to get grounded in the present moment, and we're able to, at that point, sort of anchor in the rough sea waters, right? And be able to kind of make a sort of a decision to either sort of hunker down to re-regulate or be able to sort of make a decision how one wants to move forward. The DBT framework, as well as the trauma-informed framework, has helped inform our training by using the idea of working with dialectics. So essentially holding two opposite ideas at the same time, kind of working in the gray. I think, Susan, you mentioned something about being sad and also having, being in a sad time and using laughter, right? Like that's a dialectic and is necessary. The importance of knowing how trauma impacts the individual, the importance of mindfulness, and the necessity of having accessible skills for people to understand and respond to their human experience in a really stressful work environment. Toss it back to Rena.
So I became personally interested in the topic of prosecutor well-being while I was still working as a prosecutor at the Eastern District of New York. Over my time as a prosecutor, I had a lot of experience working with cases in which trauma was at play. So from sex crimes, child-related crimes, domestic violence, other crimes of violence, organized crime and gang, which is what I worked in predominantly as a federal prosecutor. And candidly, after years of that kind of work, I was beginning to myself feel the effects of burnout. So I sought yoga, meditation, mindfulness to try to help myself. And I ended up becoming a certified yoga teacher and informally finding myself spreading the teachings that I was learning to very informally to other people that I was working with, which included other lawyers and also at the time, a lot of cooperating witnesses that I was talking to who were incarcerated. So incarcerated people and speaking to them about ways that they could manage the stress of being incarcerated through mindfulness. And after I left the Eastern District for the private sector, that I knew a lot about different modalities from my own work in well-being, and I wanted to connect the knowledge that I had learned with lawyers in particular, which and I think you're all lawyers here, so I can speak, can speak, but we're not always the people that are so excited about taking care of ourselves, or maybe learning, stretching a little outside of the norm to think about other modalities. So I became very passionate about teaching to lawyers about other ways to enhance their own well-being. And I ended up teaming up with Alison and the Institute for Innovation and Prosecution. I'm sure you all know them, but if you do not, I would encourage you to check their website out. They are a prosecutorial think tank with whom Alison and I have done a bunch of work. And they work with prosecutors across the country and have some really innovative collaborations and looks at the way we're all doing this work. So we all work together, Alison, myself, and Michelle Mason from the IIP. In the first instance, we created a trauma-informed prosecution training. And that training is kind of the standard, more of a standard bread and butter trauma-informed training, which tracks the way that prosecutors interact with trauma throughout the life of a case. So we define trauma, and then we talk about how it impacts each of the stages of the prosecutor experience. So from getting a case through sentencing to appeal. And it was very clear during that training to all of us that part 2 was on the horizon, that was going to be part 1, and that part 2 was going to be about our own well-being as prosecutors, because it was clear that working with all of this brought up a lot for all of us working in it. So we gave the test run of part 1 of the trauma-informed prosecution training to the San Francisco DA's office, and the response was very positive, and also we want the second part about well-being. So it was very clear to us that there was a huge need, and that we were trying to figure out how to write a training that was going to help with that need. We knew it was going to be important before COVID, and then COVID happened, and we were together drafting it during COVID. So we knew that it was going to be something that was, cascading and evolving, as the other presenters have touched on. So we have a second presentation that we developed with the Institute for Innovation and Prosecution. You can see both part 1 and part 2 on their website, which are kind of a loose, I guess the basic version of the presentation that Alison and I have been giving to prosecutors' offices across the country. It's been really such a blessing to be able to speak to prosecutors across the country and setting up trainings on this topic, because we've really got to hear firsthand from everybody on the ground what everyone is experiencing. And it's clear that this is all very timely. And one of the other presenters said it, like, this is the moment that we are all looking for this in the job. It's not just COVID. It's not just the stresses of the job. It's the social unrest and the day-to-day grind of what's happening with prosecutors today that's different and the same that it has been for the last 10, 15, 20 years. So part 1 of our training, and we'll give you an overview. If you are someone that's interested in this training, you can feel free to reach out to us. We will set up a call with you and talk to you about it. Because we've had this evolving process of trying to respond to the need, we're really talking with offices and trying to listen to them about what they need, and then tailoring our presentations to their staff. And what we've heard feedback about is that it's not only AEDAs or assistants, whatever they're, however you're called across the country, but it's also staff. It's support staff, it's paralegals, because that homicide case that is so grisly is not just you as a lawyer, it's your team that's helping you, because none of us do that job without amazing support systems that help us with our discovery and everything else. So we're hearing that people are looking for training, not only for the lawyers, but also for staff. So
Rena, can I just interject there too, of just like in trauma informed too, is really having sort of a common language. So not only just having sort of the social workers in the office kind of know what trauma is and how to respond, but having sort of everybody from the front desk to, you know, the paralegals to the attorneys sort of speaking the same language and really understanding what trauma is and how it impacts everyone.
About 5 minutes left.
So let's go through just quickly the topics of our well-being presentation, which is part 2 of our trainings. We define well-being as it relates to prosecutors. We discuss the connection between well-being and ethics. We demonstrate that prosecutor well-being is critical to support fair case adjudication, reduce attrition, and the other goals that other presenters have touched on. We identify the signs and the consequences of not investing in well-being. Alison talks at length about the different serious consequences, including vicarious trauma, burnout, secondary traumatic stress. And we define the 6 areas of well-being. That is our own kind of spin on the ABA's 6 areas of well-being and guidance to support each of these 6 areas. And what we're trying to bring is teaching small practices and simple ways to actually do this for yourself, because the goal is lofty, but we don't all have time to go meditate on a mountain for 10 hours. So that would be very nice to do sometimes. Sometimes we only have 5 minutes. So we're introducing ways to bring it into your life on a day-to-day basis. And suggesting that tending to prosecutor well-being is the most accessible criminal justice reform that you can individually implement yourself today as a prosecutor. And we're also offering, with these 2 trainings, consulting services for prosecutors who are looking for help to do this, because some of you have great support and some offices need support. So for those who are looking for support, we're offering that as well. And we thank you. And Alison,
I just dropped the link for your article as well.
Oh, right. So Alison dropped a link to a New York Law Journal article that I wrote with Michelle Mason of the IIP about prosecutor well-being. And our contact information, I think, is in the booklet. So you can feel free to reach out to us anytime. And we're so thankful and excited for the breakout rooms.